Get real advice about anything from two women who've experienced a lot of life. They want to share their joy and knowledge of life with you. These two women are young enough to remember and old enough to know. Here's your hosts, Pam Gray and Rochelle Alhaddon.
Welcome to Chat with Women. This is Pam.
Hi, this is Rochelle.
We have a great show today. We have 4 different guests. You want to stay tuned. We're covering many topics. And our first guest we'd like to welcome is Kelly Standing. And Kelly is the author of I'm Still Standing, How One Woman's Brushes with Death Taught Her How to Live. She's an author, motivational speaker, executive coach for America's top executives and celebrities. Welcome, Kelly. How are you?
Thank you. Good morning. I am well.
Good. Well, I'll tell you what, looking at your book and reading about you, I would love you to tell us your story that brought you to writing this book because it's pretty amazing.
Well, thank you. I think once your audience hears why you say that, maybe I'll say I'm sorry. But I've had what some people consider a remarkable life. To me, it was just my life. I didn't know the difference. But I have been hit by a car and struck by lightning. At the age of 6, the neighborhood bully used my own jump rope to hang me from a tree by my neck. I went into fast forward to my 29th year or 30th year, and I was ill for 8 months and in the hospital for 5 weeks, and doctors told me I had 48 hours to live, and I better say my goodbyes to my 3-year-old daughter forever. And so it's been a bit of a roller coaster, as you might guess, but it's really not how often I've nearly died or even how I've nearly died, but it's how I've chosen to live that brought me to write the book. Because I am one of the happiest people I know, so full of joy from minute one almost. My mother says I came out of the womb, my first nickname was Face, because my face was just, you looked in my crib and I was filled with joy. And I'm no longer in a crib, but you look at my face and I'm full of joy.
Well, that's that's amazing, though, that you can go through. I think the last one sounds like the worst. You're laying in the hospital and told you have a few days to live.
Right.
How do you stay positive,
full of
joy when somebody just told you you're going to die?
Well, I think it started with my upbringing, but you don't even have to have had the upbringing I did to learn this resilience. It's a recipe my dad taught me, but you don't have to have had my dad to make the recipe work for you. And it goes all the way back to my hanging from that tree when I was 6 years old. My dad just happened to come home the opposite way he normally would have and happened to see 2 little red things hanging from a tree, and they were my little red kids. And I happen to believe that everything, and was taught to believe that everything is wired for good. So an argument I had with my parents at a shoe store over wanting the red kids instead of the white ones that everyone else on my block had actually turned out to be a good thing. Even an argument from a toddler or a 6-year-old can turn out to save your toddler's life. So I'm not saying every parent should give in to every argument they have, but in that shoe store, I wanted to stand out, maybe as a Kelly Standing. I wanted to stand out and argued for those red kids. Well, fast forward to the day that bully decided to do the unthinkable and hang me from that tree. My dad came home the opposite way he would have. He, to this day, cannot explain why. We would call it divine intervention. Others might call it something else. But he happened to glance over his shoulder and saw those 2 little red things hanging from a tree, my little red kids. And so those shoes saved my life.
Wow.
And on that day, my dad convinced me that I was the luckiest little girl on the block, not in spite of the fact that had happened. And that's the message for your listeners, is it's not in spite of what's happened to you that makes you the luckiest person or the most blessed person you know. It's because of those things. My dad would say, your scars tell your story. Scars make you more beautiful, not less so, because that's where your heart and your soul and your experience is. That's where your history is written. So, wow, when you have a dad like that, you emerge with a smile on your face. And he used some sort of wisdom from the street to convince me I was, in fact, the luckiest little girl on the block. So I can say more about that if you want me to. But really, for your listeners' point of view, I would say there's good in everything that happens. It doesn't mean it feels good or looks good or smells good, but you can choose to see the good.
Well, I'm just like, I'm beyond. What happened to the bully, for heaven's sakes? Who pounced on him?
Did he go to jail?
Yeah, 6 years. I mean, what? Good heavens.
I know. Well, I changed the names to protect the innocent or not always innocent, the fairly guilty or the misguided. And so I did attempt to Google the real name of the bully, and I couldn't find him. So I'm guessing he's either incarcerated.
Yes, I was going to say.
Yes, and which I think, given his performance, that is likely, or he's no longer with us. And,
wow.
But I will say it was a fairly unsatisfying exchange between my father and his father. And again, not my dad chose to see what's most important to me. My dad was an Eagle Scout, and to him, what was the most important thing on that day was not payback, was not revenge. It was, how will my daughter remember this event in her life? Will she see a bully behind every tree, ready to hang her by her neck, or will she view herself as empowered and capable and good in a crisis? And that became his focus that day.
What a beautiful, beautiful man.
Oh, yeah. And he just emerged from cancer for the 4th time.
Wow.
Yay, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. He and my mom just celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary.
Lovely. Oh, that's lovely. Well, let me ask you something, Kelly. What are the 2 most important lessons that you feel you've learned through these life's experiences?
The 2, do I only get 2? No,
you can give us more. You give us whatever you want, honey.
Well, from where you
come.
For your listeners, everybody has something, some kind of adversity, whether it's dire, difficult circumstances like bullies and violent crime and that kind of thing, or whether it's just everyday human hiccups like gossip or marital angst or weight gain or loss or money problems, whatever it is. If you don't love your job, I would say one lesson is, if you don't get what you want, find a way to love what you get anyway.
That's a good one.
There's always a way. There is absolutely some good in everything. You may not see it immediately, but if you know it's there and it's waiting for you to notice it. I call them glimmers of grace. There is, in every poop storm of my life, there have been glimmers of grace. So that would be the first one. If you don't get what you want, find a way to love what you get anyway. And, wow, I would say everything, absolutely everything, is wired for good. Even the events or the experiences that look bad and feel bad and smell bad. And you have to choose to see the good.
Well, it's interesting. We've gone through life a lot, hearing, is the glass half full or half empty? How do you look at life? And if you look at life as a glass half full, you tend to enjoy your life more than always seeing the negative about everything. But one of the things I want to ask you is, okay, that sounds really great, but what if your life is really spinning out of control and you don't know how to see the good? How do you help, because you are a coach, how do you help people see the good even when everything seems bad? Let's say divorce, let's say
losing their job,
big things. How do you help them?
Right. Well, you have to start with where they are. And I'll go a little theological on you, because sometimes my clients allow me to do that. I'm a former hospital chaplain, and so I come at this from a theological perspective. But if somebody isn't a spiritual or religious person, that's okay, because this can still apply, even if you feel like you're flying solo. But I would say meet the person where they are and say, here is that. Just as biblically God created out of chaos in the beginning, God, the universe, still creates out of chaos. So if your life feels chaotic, the message from that historically is something great is coming. there is, if you go back through history, when there was great upheaval, look at the American Revolution, not to cite a theological place, but wow, we got a country that's fantastic out of what was truly, I think the people who lived through it would say that was chaotic, and lives were horrifically disrupted, and people died, and it's awful, but out of that came huge, or even 9/11, the stories that you hear, as tragic and horrific as that was, and I would not subtract any of the pain of that from anyone, not suggest that they need to be happy about that. But I would say, look for the good and find the good, and just, there are so many stories of connections and revelations that people had as a result of that experience, people who were spared and even people who endured the loss of loved ones and that kind of thing. So out of great chaos, the universe, God, whatever you care to call it creates great good.
Well, I love that. Don't you love that? Because it helps you when you are in that mess, whatever it is, because you're right. Life is messy.
Yeah, but it's the way you looking at things, which I think is a fabulous way to look at things, Kelly. And I think what you're doing for us and our listeners is, okay, you are in the thick of something, but you got to stop. You've got to stop the whirlwind, stop this, think of something that is positive, and from that, maybe the whirlwind will stop.
Right. Well, I can give you an example if we have time for one.
Absolutely. Yes, for you we do.
When I was dying, it was back in 1990, and the blood supply was not considered entirely safe. So people who needed transfusions, and I needed 6 of them, needed to get designated donors. And I was very, very angry shortly before that because my ex-spouse required me to change my religion. And he didn't even really practice his. So I thought that was so outrageous that I would be expected to switch denominations when his wasn't one he had particularly embraced. But wouldn't you know, I did rail and could rail and now have learned not to rail when that kind of injustice occurs, because as it turned out, because I had attended 2 churches leading up to my illness, when the time came that we had to send out word that I was running a quart or 2 low, blood-wise, people from both congregations showed up to keep me alive. They donated blood to keep me alive. So even the things we rail against most and think are so, and I was a woman of faith, so to be asked to abandon mine for what I thought was a pretty capricious reason seemed very unreasonable. And I railed more at God than at my ex about that. And but as it turned out, it ended up saving my life, just like the little red shoes. I was in the midst of an argument. I must have these little red kids, and I want to cling to my denomination. I want to stick with my faith roots. Well, had I done that, I wouldn't have had enough blood to keep me alive. It's not that they were running out. I mean, it's not like I wouldn't have gotten transfusions perhaps, but it was dire. And the fact that injustice had occurred was precisely what saved my life.
Well, one of the things that we've always said, Kelly, is that things happen for a reason. Right. And if we look at life that way, as we go through these what we call messy life, and we say, okay, I was supposed to be here at this time. I was supposed to say this or feel this. And if we look at life that way, it'll be less of a torture for us. And I love what you're saying, and we thank you so much for joining us today. And we really, really recommend your book. We're going to be reading it through and through over and over again, Kelly. This is a fabulous way to look at life. And, of course, this is Kelly Standing, and her book is I'm Still Standing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.